You can't handle me, just go." The giant bride screamed, but the cowboy said, "You're coming with me. Witness this unbelievable, true inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Let's get started!" The bells of Red Creek's only church echoed across the dusty plains that afternoon, but instead of joy, the sound carried a heaviness that settled over the entire town. People had come from miles around, not because they cared deeply for the couple being wed, but because they wanted to witness a spectacle. Everyone whispered about Clara May, the bride who towered above nearly every man in the county. Some cruelly called her the Giant Bride, while others muttered that no man could ever really want her. In their eyes, she wasn't meant for love, only gossip. Clara May stood inside the church, her white dress stitched to perfection, yet struggling to contain her broad shoulders and tall frame. The gown was beautiful, but she couldn't help feeling like it was a costume disguising her sorrow. Her hands shook as she clutched the bouquet, and her lips pressed tightly together as the preacher spoke of holy vows and eternal promises. She didn't dare look at the crowd because she could feel their eyes piercing through her like knives, some filled with mockery, others with pity. What hurt her most was knowing that many had come not to bless her marriage, but to see if the rumors about her size, her looks, her very being were true. The man beside her, William Barnes, was everything society in Red Creek respected. He was a banker, polished in manner, wealthy by inheritance, and sharp in business. Yet his eyes were as cold as steel, his smile more of a sneer than a token of affection. Clara knew this wasn't love, this was a transaction. Her parents had encouraged the match, telling her that William was a safe choice, someone who could provide security. But as she stood beside him, her heart screamed the truth. Security without love was nothing but a cage. The preacher's voice rose in the air, echoing off the wooden rafters. "Do you, Clara May, take William Barnes to be your lawful husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, until death do you part?" The words seemed to mock her, as though daring her to say yes to a life she did not want. Clara's throat tightened. She could hear the snickers of girls in the pews, girls who had teased her since childhood for being taller than their brothers. She saw men smirking, nudging one another, as if her marriage was a joke to be shared later over whiskey. Her chest heaved with a rising tide of shame, anger, and despair. She turned to look at William, hoping for even the faintest spark of tenderness, but instead she found only calculation. His lips curled in annoyance, as if he were silently commanding her to hurry up and seal the deal. Something inside Clara broke. All the years of humiliation, all the years of being told she was too much, too tall, too strong, too noticeable, boiled over. With tears blurring her vision, she ripped the veil from her head and let it fall to the floor. Her voice thundered through the church, silencing every whisper in an instant. "You can't handle me. Just go!" The gasps that followed rattled the very walls. William's face turned crimson, his pride crushed in front of the entire town. He clenched his fists, but he did not fight for her, did not try to comfort her. Instead, he muttered a curse under his breath and stormed down the aisle, leaving the church in a cloud of shame and fury. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some pitied her, others laughed openly. Clara could feel their judgment like fire on her skin. She could not stay another second. Lifting her dress, she bolted down the side aisle and out the heavy oak doors, her satin hem dragging in the dirt. The sunlight blinded her for a moment, and she stumbled into the street, breathing hard, the cool September air filling her lungs. Her dream of marriage, of being accepted, of finally belonging, shattered in a single moment. Her heart pounded, and for a terrifying instant, Clara thought she might faint. Alone, abandoned, humiliated, she wanted to vanish into the earth. She pressed her hand to her chest, whispering, "What have I done?" But deep down, she knew the truth. What she had done was not weakness. It was strength. She had saved herself from a loveless prison. As she staggered toward the steps, a shadow fell across her path. She raised her tear-streaked face and froze. Standing a few feet away, leaning against a black stallion with reins in his hand, was a cowboy. His hat was tipped low over steel blue eyes that glimmered with something the others in town lacked: understanding. His clothes were worn from the trail, his boots dusty, and his jaw set in rugged determination. He wasn't dressed for a wedding, but he was dressed like a man who knew who he was and didn't need anyone's approval. It was Jack Callahan. Clara knew him by reputation. He wasn't a banker, nor a man of polished manners. He was a drifter at times, a ranch hand at others, a cowboy who worked where he was needed. Many in Red Creek dismissed him as aimless, but Clara had heard whispers of his courage, how he had once fought off a gang of cattle rustlers single-handedly, how he had stood up for a widow who was about to lose her land. He was a man of action, not words. And yet, when his eyes met Clara's, she saw more kindness than she had ever seen in William's cold gaze. Clara's lips trembled. "I'm nothing but a fool," she whispered, her voice breaking. Jack pushed himself off the saddle and stepped closer, the sound of his boots steady on the gravel. He tilted his hat back and spoke in a low, unwavering voice, one meant for her ears alone. "No, ma'am, you're not a fool. You're the bravest woman in that church." Clara shook her head. "You don't know me. You don't know what they say. I've been laughed at my whole life. I don't belong here. Maybe I don't belong anywhere." Jack's jaw tightened. "I know enough. I saw you stand up for yourself when most would have bowed their head. That takes grit. And grit's worth more than money, more than pride." He paused, his eyes softening. "You belong, Clara. You've just been looking in the wrong crowd." Her breath caught in her throat. The way he said her name, without judgment, without mockery, made her feel human again. For the first time that day, she didn't feel like a spectacle. She felt seen. Jack extended his hand. The townsfolk were already spilling out of the church, their whispers swirling like a storm around them. "What's he doing? Is he crazy? Her? With him?" But Jack didn't waver. His hand remained steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're coming with me," he said firmly, not as a command, but as a promise. Clara stared at his hand, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and longing. Could she trust him? Could she leave behind the life she thought she needed, the life that had just rejected her so cruelly? Her heart beat louder than the murmurs of the crowd. Slowly, almost as if testing fate itself, she placed her trembling hand into his. The moment their hands touched, a strange calm washed over her. Jack pulled her gently toward his horse, ignoring the gasps and protests behind them. In one smooth motion, he lifted her onto the saddle, as though she weighed nothing at all, as though her size was never a burden but a strength. He climbed up behind her, his arms steady around her waist, anchoring her in a way she had never felt before. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. As they rode out of Red Creek, Clara turned her head one last time. She saw the faces of the townsfolk, their mouths open in shock, their eyes wide with disbelief. For once, their whispers didn't matter. What mattered was the steady beat of the horse beneath her, the warmth of Jack's arm, and the quiet truth he spoke as they disappeared into the horizon. "You're not too much, Clara," Jack murmured near her ear. "They're just too small to see you." Her tears fell again, but this time they weren't from shame. They were from hope, hope that maybe, just maybe, she was finally where she was meant to be. The moon had risen high above the Texas plains by the time Clara and Jack slowed their horse to a trot. The dusty road behind them stretched like a ribbon back toward Red Creek, but Clara refused to look. She didn't want to see the church, the mocking faces, or the life she had just left behind. What lay ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, uncertainty felt like freedom. The cool night air lifted the weight from her chest, though every now and then doubt crept in, whispering questions she wasn't ready to answer. Could she trust this cowboy who had appeared at the very moment her world collapsed? Was she running towards something better, or just away from more pain? Jack didn't speak much as they rode, but she could feel his presence steady and unwavering behind her. His arm was not possessive but protective, guiding the horse through the dim path with the ease of a man who had lived his whole life beneath the stars. Clara wanted to ask him why he had stepped forward when no one else dared, why he cared when others mocked, but her voice caught every time she tried. For now she clung to the silence, letting it soothe the raw edges of her broken pride. At last they stopped near a small stream where the horse could drink. Jack dismounted first, then offered his hand to help Clara down. For a moment she hesitated. In the church, she had felt like a giant towering above everyone, awkward and exposed. But when Jack's strong hand closed around hers, she didn't feel too much. She felt balanced. As her boots touched the ground, she realized she hadn't eaten all day. Her stomach growled softly, and embarrassment colored her cheeks. Jack noticed. Without a word, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a wrapped piece of cornbread. "Ain't much," he said with a half-smile, "but it'll fill the gap." She accepted it with trembling hands, the simple gesture striking deeper than any polished compliment William had ever given her. As she ate, Jack knelt to tend the horse, humming an old tune that drifted like comfort through the night air. When she finally found her courage, Clara whispered, "Why did you do it? Why take me away? You could have just watched like the others." Jack straightened, brushing dust from his gloves, his eyes fixed on the flickering stars. "Because I've seen enough men in my life too, afraid to stand for what's right. You were standing alone in there. I figured it was time someone stood beside you." Clara swallowed hard, the cornbread suddenly dry in her throat. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not as a burden, not as a joke, but as a woman worthy of respect. "But you don't know me," she said again, almost pleading, as though daring him to change his mind. Jack turned to her, his blue eyes unwavering. "I know enough. I know you got fire in you, and the world's been trying to snuff it out. Let me tell you, Clara, I ain't scared of fire." The way he said her name sent a shiver through her. She wrapped her arms around herself, not because she was cold, but because something inside her was unraveling. Walls she had built over years of rejection, now crumbling piece by piece. They camped by the stream that night. Jack built a small fire, and Clara watched the sparks rise into the sky like tiny prayers. She thought of the vows she had refused to make, the life she had walked away from, and wondered if she had made the right choice. Yet when she glanced at Jack across the firelight, his face lit with quiet strength, she felt safer than she ever had in William's shadow. For once, the future didn't terrify her. It beckoned. Morning came with golden light spilling across the horizon. Jack saddled the horse, and they set off again. Clara expected him to take her far away, to some distant town where no one knew her name, but instead he guided her toward the rolling hills outside Red Creek, to a small ranch nestled against the valley. The house was modest, built from weathered wood, but smoke curled warmly from its chimney, and the land stretched wide and open. It wasn't wealth that greeted them, but peace. "This yours?" Clara asked softly, unable to hide her surprise. Jack nodded. "Been working it on my own. Nothing fancy, but it's honest." He dismounted and looked at her with steady eyes. "You're welcome here, Clara. Stay as long as you need. No one's going to laugh at you under this roof." Her heart squeezed. She had expected rescue, perhaps pity, but not a place to belong. She dismounted, her dress torn from the ride, her hair tangled, yet Jack didn't flinch at her appearance. To him, she wasn't a spectacle. She was simply Clara. Days turned into weeks, and Clara began to find herself again. She helped Jack with chores, her strength proving more useful than she'd ever believed. Together they hauled water, fed the livestock, and mended fences. For the first time, her size was not a curse, but a blessing. Jack never once teased her. Instead, he marveled at her capability. "Strongest woman I ever met," he'd say with a grin, and Clara would blush, her heart fluttering like a schoolgirl's. But Red Creek had not forgotten. Word spread quickly of the runaway bride and the cowboy who dared claim her. Some called it scandal, others a disgrace. One afternoon, while Clara and Jack were repairing a gate, riders appeared at the edge of the ranch. William Barnes sat tall among them, his polished boots gleaming, his face twisted with fury. "You think you can humiliate me, Clara?" He spat, his voice carrying across the yard. "Running off with a drifter? You'll regret this. I'll see to it you're ruined." Clara's knees trembled, but Jack stepped forward, calm as ever. "She don't belong to you, Barnes. You left her in that church. That was your choice," Williams sneered. "She's a fool if she thinks you can offer her anything." Jack's jaw tightened, but he didn't raise his voice. "Maybe so. But I'd rather offer her honesty than chain her to a lie." The men behind William muttered, unsure whether to follow him or retreat. Clara's chest swelled with pride. For years, she had fought battles alone, but now she wasn't alone anymore. She stepped forward, lifting her chin, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'd rather live in a shack with Jack Callahan than rot in a mansion with a man like you." Her words silenced them all. William's face darkened, his pride wounded deeper than before. He spat at the ground and turned his horse. "You'll regret this," he growled before riding off with his men. But as their dust settled, Clara felt a strength she'd never known. She had spoken not just against William, but against every cruel voice that had ever told her she was too much. She had chosen herself, and she had chosen Jack. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Clara and Jack sat on the porch, the quiet hum of crickets filling the air. Clara leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I never thought I'd find this," she whispered. Jack turned his head, pressing a gentle kiss to her hair. "Sometimes the best things find you when you stop listening to the world and start listening to yourself." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were of gratitude, of love, of finally being seen. She had been mocked, abandoned, humiliated. But through it all, she had found something rare, a man who didn't try to shrink her, but who cherished every part of her. In the months that followed, Clara and Jack built a life together on that ranch. The whispers from town never truly stopped, but they grew fainter with time. And even when they reached her ears, Clara no longer crumbled beneath them. For every cruel word, she had Jack's steady hand, his unwavering gaze, and his quiet assurance, "You're not too much. Clara, they're just too small to see you." And under the endless Texas sky, with love as wild and unyielding as the land itself, the giant bride finally found her place, not in the eyes of those who mocked her, but in the heart of the cowboy who never once asked her to be less.